me. And thank all of you for having me. I am Mike Mitchell, the director of the Military and Veterans Resource Center at Jacksonville University. I work with all of those who are active duty military, veterans, spouses, or dependents, mostly using their benefits. But if they're connected, they don't have to be using benefits. So I am a resource for different things other than just school, jobs, whatever the case may be, whatever they may need. I point them in the right direction to make sure everyone's good to go. I am a two-time graduate of Jacksonville University. I came there in 2013 during the fall after retiring from the Navy after 21 great years, and graduated in 2015. And I was offered this position originally as the veteran student coordinator, and I got promoted maybe a couple of years later as the director. So that's what I am and what I do. Let me try the share screen thing here. Here we go. See how that works. Let's get out of here. Share screen. Host disabled participant share screening. Did anything pop up? You couldn't see anything? I got it. There we go. So that was me. 21 years. Well, yeah, majority of my life. Clean faced at one point. Of course, I had a haircut, and because of COVID, I don't right now. But this was me, and at the time, and now I'm a whole different person. So this presentation will more than likely take about 45 minutes. Normally in a classroom setting, it may be a little longer because of questions and everything that would take place during the session. I will give the presentation. If there's any questions throughout, feel free to chime in, or just wait till after it's all said and done and ask any questions you have, and I would gladly answer anything you have. I would definitely give some time after your break to answer anything, just to assist with any knowledge base that you would like to have about our military. This presentation is normally geared towards our faculty and staff, but for you, I'll make sure I curtail it to the student body. All right, so this is Green Zone training, and this was something that we adopted back in about 2016 from the University of North Carolina. And the big thing about this is this isn't going to, it's not going to make you an expert, but it's going to give you the basic knowledge about the military, understanding of just what a military student or a military member is or was like, and the things that we've encountered while we were in. At Jacksonville University, I know this says 600, but right now we have a current total of about a little over 400 active duty veterans, dependents, and spouses at the university. To include of our faculty and staff, we have about roughly 40 faculty and staff as well who served in the military as well. So the big thing behind, like the main thing behind this is that we just want to ensure that you have some type of basic knowledge. You're not going to be an expert from this, but at least you have an understanding of who they are. This is the overview. Okay, we're going to start with the Department of Defense. And the Department of Defense is headed by the Secretary of Defense, who is appointed by the President of the United States. under the defense, there are three military departments. You have the uh, Army, Navy, and the Air Force. Notice there are some missing. The Marine Corps, they're actually a part of the Navy. So there is no department of the Marine Corps. And the other piece is the Coast Guard is not part of the Department of Defense. So that's why you don't see that. Uh, they're they're in the Department of Homeland Security today. There were other departments that we'll get into here throughout the presentation. And to go back, neither of these individuals, well, they're all civilian. They didn't have to serve in the military, but some of them actually have some type of military background being in this position. So the key thing from this is most people associate someone who's in the military with being a soldier. That's one of the big things that's out there. And for me, it doesn't bother me, but there may be some that said, I'm insulted because you called me a soldier, but I served in the Navy. So the key thing to take away from this is that if you were in the Army, you're a soldier. Marine Corps, you're Marine. Navy, you're a sailor. Air Force, airman. Coast Guard, Coast Guardman, so on and so forth, like that. And as you can see, the roles and the missions of each branch is listed in this PowerPoint. And everyone can see everything, right? All right. We have one student waiting, Elizabeth. I'll admit. Okay, we're gonna move on. Can't move on for some reason. Did you take control back, Dr. Wagner?
No, I did not take control back. You have it.
That's strange. Let me stop share and try this again. Here we go.
All right.
Okay, so you have two types of service. You have the active side. Those are the ones who serve 24 hours, 7 days a week. And then you have the reserve component who serves 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the year for normally a total of 39 days. And I'll get into each one as we go along. First branch of service, which is the oldest branch, and each branch that you'll see goes in order of precedence. So the Army is the oldest, and as you can see, the main function is to protect and defend the United States by way of ground troops. Of course, they are the largest branch because they have, for what they do and their function, they need more people. One of the key takeaways from the Army is that they have the full-time active duty service. They also have the Army Reserves, and they also have the Army National Guard. There is a difference between the two. You can see it on the screen, but I'll get into that portion here later in the presentation. Any questions so far? Second branch is the Marine Corps, and they are known as the infantry of the Navy. They actually are a part of the Navy where they're on ships or whatnot, and sometimes we take the Marine Corps over to wherever they need to go to do the things they need to do. The Marine Corps does not have their own medical. They use the Navy. Our Navy corpsmen is the ones who take care of the Marines. So you have what we call green and blue side. Green side is that corpsmen who work with Marines solely, and they wear normally Marine uniform, vice a Navy uniform, but they're still in the Navy. They have the Marine Corps Reserve, but there is no Marine National Guard. And one other thing to take away from the Marine Corps is the fact that when you hear Marine or see Marine, you think of some tough person in uniform or whatnot. But think about the word Marine. What do you get from that word? Can anybody tell me? No, Will. No one knows Marine. Think about marine biology. What does that mean?
Water.
Exactly. So that's what the Marine is all about. They're dealing with the water. And you look at their insignia, you'll see an anchor. That's a part of it. But we have a mindset that the society sets where we think the Marine Corps, the big bad tough whatever, there may be, but their mission is not really about that. Okay, the third oldest branch of the military is the United States Navy, my branch. There are several sides to the Navy. We have the surface Navy, we have the aviation Navy, we have the submarine force, and we also have our construction side. Each one of us have different languages. We don't all speak the same. Actually, every branch of service, we all have a different language we speak. Believe it or not, you would think we understand one another, but there's times that we don't. Like in the Navy, if we're going to use the bathroom, we're going to use what's called the head. In the Army, what they use is called a latrine. So there's different terminology, meaning the same thing, but it's just that if you didn't serve in one branch, you may not understand the other based on what they're saying. When people hear the Navy, all they mainly think of is ships, and that's not necessarily the case. Everyone who has served in the Navy has not been on a ship. Some have only served on shore duty their whole naval career. I have a friend who served 22 years in the Navy, never touched a ship. But she traveled, she was stationed overseas in places like that often, but not necessarily being on the ship. Then you have the Air Force, the youngest branch of service. As you can tell, they were established in 1947, which wasn't very long ago. And their main thing is, air dominance. One thing I can say about let me go back. I didn't mention this. The Navy does not have the Navy National Guard, but they do have the Naval Reserve. The Air Force, when you think of the Air Force, you think of planes. But I can give you one true fact, and that is the Air Force does not have more planes than the Navy. The Navy actually has more planes than the Air Force. The Air Force has the Air Force Reserve, and they also have the Air National Guard. So the only two branches of service that has the National Guard is the Army and the Air Force. The only two. We have someone else coming in. And I got stuck again. So I'm going back out and come back in. Share screen. Share. All right. And the last of the branch of service is the Coast Guard. Now, when they originally established, they were part of the Revenue Cutter Service. And then they became a part of the Treasury Department. And then they became the Department of Transportation. But because of 9/11, they then became what's called the Department of Homeland Security. And that's what they are to this day. Only during time of war that they will become the Department of the Navy. And I'll show you a lot of resemblance as I go further along, how much we are pretty much the same. The Navy and the Coast Guard is what I'm talking about. And the only thing they have is the Coast Guard reserves. And as you know, the Coast Guard is mainly, they're out there all the time, roving the waters, making sure that no one falls overboard or there's no kind of casualties or whatever out in the ocean.
They do want a drug interdiction now too.
Yeah, they do that too. And to speak about drug interdiction, the Navy, we're the ones who we take the Coast Guard over there, but they're the only ones that have the authority to do anything with apprehending anybody overseas. And we normally do that down south, down in Panama and places like that. I've done about 3 counter narcotic interdiction operations. They're pretty interesting. A lot of drugs. So as I mentioned before, a component, originally I mentioned that if you're in the reserves, you're going to serve, your internet connection is unstable. They're going to serve at least 39 days out of the year, 1 weekend per month, and 2 weeks out of the year. The reserve component is ran by the government as a whole, but the National Guard is actually ran by the state. So if something happened in the state of Florida, the governor of Florida could actually activate the National Guard to do whatever needs to be done. Let's say like this COVID-19, if they decided to do some type of curfew, he could have activated the National Guard to ensure that the citizens in the state of Florida are abiding by the curfew as set forth. One of the big things is normally the hurricane season has approached us. If there's a major hurricane in the area, they will be deployed as well. But don't get it wrong now, at the same time, yes, they do work for the state, but they also, if something does happen under the government, then they'll be activated as well. And as if you listen to the word reserve, just like having a reserve tank, that's what they are. They're on standby for whatever is needed. If we need more military members to help out in any conflict or whatever we have, then we'll activate the reservists and they will become part of the active duty force at that point. Normally your National Guard or even reservists, they hold a civilian job, but when they have to do their duties and they're activated, they're in the military until such time. By law, they cannot lose that job that they hold. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I would add, Mike, too, that all of you, including me, who have served, we could be called back to active duty anytime by presidential order.
Yes, I have, me personally, I have 2 more years. So I have to actually serve a total of 30 years to actually be retired. I am at 28 years. I served 21 and I transferred into what's called Fleet Reserve.
I'd like to add something as well. My boyfriend was active duty Army and then moved into IRR, and to keep up his contract, he's currently in the Army Reserves. Yes. And when he was job hunting, there was a lot of bias and discrimination against him getting a job because, 1 weekend out of the month and the 2 weeks out of the year, they're like, oh, we're not hiring you because, of this.
Right.
So there is a lot of bias and discrimination in terms of people that do reservist or National Guard positions.
Yeah, I'm sure. And if any time you run across something like that, you could always let me know, because I have contact with an organization for the Guard and Reserves that they actually enforce the laws. And if they hear something like that, I'm pretty sure they'll investigate that. So he's no longer IRR, right? He's actually in a reserve status, because what happens is every enlistee that comes in serves a minimum of 8 years.
Yep.
So if I sign up for 4, I'm doing 4 years active, 4 years IRR, which means if something happens, call me back.
Yep. He did his 4 years active, deployed in Afghanistan for a couple tours, and then IRR for the remainder of his contract.
And now he's actually reserves now.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Just want to clarify, because there's 2 differences. When you hear IRR is inactive ready reserves. And then you have your active reserve component. All right, let's talk about the military rank structure. So you have officers and you have enlisted. I was an enlistee. I made it all the way up to E7, E8 selectee. I did not take it. It was time for me to go home, which was my decision. But yeah, enlisted goes from E1 through E9, and we'll talk about the enlisted ranks first. So you have your E1 through E4s. They're more of your doers, your worker bees. They're not really in a supervisory position unless you're in the Navy. In the rate that I held, the E4 would be a supervisor, but most branches of service, the E1 through E4, they're the ones out there getting the hard work done. Normally the first 3 years of their career, they'll be somewhere in that field. Some of them could advance to E5 pretty quick, depends on what they came in as. Those who came in could come in from E1, E2, or E3. It just depends on having any type of college or any junior ROTC experience, things like that could get them advanced to E2 or E3 instead of coming in straight off as an E1. And then you have your E5 through E9, and they're known as your non-commissioned officers, and mainly make all the major decisions. Well, not all of them, but E7 through E9, those are the ones who make the major decisions. They're considered your senior NCOs, like myself. That's the role I played. A lot of the heat was placed on me. I had to ensure these things got done, and if something happens, the E1 through E4 or E1 through E6 was not the one who was going to get in trouble for it. It was going to be me, because I'm overall in charge of the situation. If that makes sense. And here we have the ranks that you would see on a Army, Marine, Air Force, Navy, or Coast Guardman's sleeve. You guys can see that pretty good. And for me, like I said, I'm a retired E7, which is known as a Chief Petty Officer. So for the civilian world, if I came into a job and said I was an E5, corporate America can see, okay, I was an E5, so he was at least in junior middle management. He knows a little, he or she knows a little something. It gives them a little basic synopsis of who you were. This was mainly put together by my former boss, Mike Fleming, who worked at Deutsche Bank, and this is what they use. They did what do they call it? The military on Wall Street or something like that. So they educated the employees, mainly the upper half of the military. And myself, as you can see, E7 through E9 is senior management, and that's the heavy role I've played. I came in as an E1 though, worked my way all the way up. All right, so we talked about the enlisted ranks, and now you have the officers. That would be Will. Will, you were 05, right? Yep. So he was definitely up there. You have officers go from 01 through 06, and then you have your flag officers who goes from 07 through 11. So you have your 01 through 03. They're normally your new officers in the military. It takes about 4 years to go from 01 through 03. Most officers, not all, there's so many different things and so many ways you can become an officer in the military. But the ones who are commissioned out of college, they had to at least have a college degree to get into the entry level of an 01. And then you have your 04 through 06. They're your more of your senior officer levels. They take on a lot of major responsibility. Your 01 through 03 is known as junior officers. And then your flag officers. One big thing to know about a flag officer is they actually have a flag. So if I was a 1-star general working out of this building, there would be a 1-star flag flying in front of that building. Anytime I'm present, that 1-star flag will be flying. And unlike most places, in the military, if that 1 star is up there and you enter that building, you better be pretty sharp when you're in there. Any given time, he or she could be walking around there, and you want to give the highest respect. Okay, here's the officer ranks, what they would wear on their collar or sleeves. One key thing to know is that the Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps, all the exact same. Navy and Coast Guard, the exact same. But I will point out that in 03, in the Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps is a captain. In 06, in the Coast Guard and the Navy is a captain. Remember, I said in 01 through 03 is a junior officer, and that's what a captain would be in the Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps. But in the Navy Coast Guard, they are in your senior officer level. Like for our NROTC unit, Captain Leverett, he is the person in charge of that NROTC unit. So that shows how much responsibility he has. I would say just as equivalent to President Cox. Because normally when they're out on a ship, they are the CEO of that ship. That makes sense. And then you have your warrant officers. The only branch that does not have a warrant officer is the Air Force. And the warrant officer is more of those, for the Navy Coast Guard anyway, they're the ones who are specialized. So in the Navy Coast Guard, I would have to be an E7 before I can be even selected as a chief warrant officer. In the Army and even the Marine Corps, they're known as warrant. Well, they all have chief warrant officers, but in the Army especially, you can come in as a warrant officer and be like a pilot, a helicopter pilot. You don't have to be an E7 like in the Navy Coast Guard to be considered as a chief warrant officer. And they're, again, like I said, they're specialized. So for me, being a chief bosun's mate, if I got commissioned as a chief warrant officer, I will still be overall in charge of that field. I'll be known as a chief bosun or bosun. And then for corporate America, here each rank structure and what they would be equivalent to. Starting from entry level as an 01, all the way up from 01 through 010 as a CEO. And normally your flag officers, they actually do end up rolling into a CEO position because of all of the civilian connections that they had to create while they were in. Because most of what they do, well, even the captains of the naval installations, they have to be involved in the community as well, because everything works hand in hand when it comes to money. Any questions?
I had a question / comment as far as officer status.
Okay.
I've been a Navy brat my whole life, and from what I understand, there's a bias amongst officers who have just come in out of college as an officer position versus the officers that work their way up. And it seems that there's more of a bias and a higher respect for those that work their way up versus just come straight out of college.
I don't know. I haven't really. It really depends on who that person is. Just like your senior enlisted. I mean, everyone who's a senior enlistee does not get that same respect. It depends on who you are as a person. You know what kind of leader you are.
Okay.
And when you say work your way up, you mean those who was once enlisted and then went off to an officer program?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
my wife, and I failed to mention this. My wife was made it all the way to E6, and then she came to Jacksonville University for a program called State 21, and I'll talk about that. Seaman to Admiral 21 is what it's actually called. She's actually retiring on June 1st as a lieutenant commander. So she was an E1 all the way through 04. So it just depends on who you are. I've been around both sides. I mean, as a senior enlistee, I interacted with officers often. We've had meetings, a lot of meetings together. Anything, just like anything in general, you know, you earn that respect based on who you are and how you take care of your people. That's the key thing. And if, Will, you want to chime in, you definitely can when it comes to the officer side.
Well, thanks, Mike. I was thinking that they do bring a level of street cred, you know, having gone through the enlisted ranks and then moved on. So typically they do know more from experience and can relate more with the enlisted than a direct commission officer. But Mike is spot on. The respect comes down to how you treat people and how the kind of work that you do.
Yeah, because just because you came from the enlisted rank doesn't mean that you were very knowledgeable. You never got in trouble, and you just did all the right things to be selected for a program. You know, and that's how that is sometimes.
I have a question.
Okay.
My brother-in-law, I believe he just made senior chief, and I also had a sister that was I think she was the E6 when she got out.
Uh-huh.
Something I always wondered was, do the commissioned officers, and in like my brother-in-law's case, him being he might be an E8 or E9 or something like that. Do they work with the commissioned officers?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is only for the Navy. I can't talk about the other branches. In the Navy, a chief's job is to train their junior officers. And that chief could make or break that junior officer's naval career, right? So you're training them and assisting them through the process of meeting all the requirements that's required of them through their pipeline from definitely in 01 through 03. Your 01s through at least 02, they're known as division officers. So they're actually working in different divisions and learning different things because they don't all know. So they have to be trained some kind of way, right? Yeah, they all go to different schools, and sitting in a classroom and being actually there is two different things. So my job was to definitely train my junior officers and make them great officers. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions before I move on? All right. I talked about the warrant officers, pretty much who they are. Like I said, they're technical. I call them technical experts. And unfortunately, the Air Force is the only branch that does not have them. I don't know why. And no, they don't have to have a college degree. But I will tell you that it's great that they do, even though it says they don't have to have one, which they don't have to have one to be commissioned. But if they want to move up the ladder, it's great to have such a thing to set you apart from the others.
And they can still fly. One thing I learned was there are a lot of warrant officers flying helicopters in the military.
Yeah, it depends on the branch. Because I know the Navy, that's not the case. Uh-oh. Okay, and here again, corporate America, all warrant officers from W1 to CW05 are all under senior management. Okay, so we talked about the military and the military rank structure. Now let's talk about the military experience. We're talking about the things that they have encountered while they were in the military. So I gave you the brief synopsis of just the military in general. So we're going to dive a little deeper into it. Okay, so those we have today, especially at Jacksonville University, they have served in Operation Enduring and also Operation Iraqi Freedom. As you can see on the screen, it tells you the time frame of Operation Enduring Freedom and also where they've been. And here we are for Operation Iraqi Freedom. So those are the two current things that's out there. Any questions about Operation Iraqi or Enduring Freedom? Okay. Military culture. One of the big things I want to point out, and I'm not going to read each bullet point because you can see it. I just want to point out and elaborate is military folks definitely emphasizing group cohesion and teamwork. That's one of our big things. And when you get out the military, those who retire, separated, whatever the case is, let's say a student coming to Jacksonville University, I served 4 years. I'm used to being around people every day and you know, with like-minded situations. But then I decided to go to college. I was stationed in California. I came to Jacksonville. I don't know anyone. I just decided to come to Jacksonville because I heard a lot about Jacksonville University and I want to go there. They're culture shock. They're lost. They can't really relate to a civilian college student because you don't, in their mind, understand them. You don't understand who they are. You don't know what they've been through because they know that you haven't been through that. It's a process, and they have to kind of be able to relate because now they're no longer in the military; they're in the civilian world, and that is a tough thing. I mean, even myself, when I retired, I remember coming to Jacksonville University as a student, and the first person I had a conversation with was a 17 going on 18-year-old who was the same age as my oldest son, and I knew that was going to be a rough road for me. But because I came from a senior leadership mindset, my mind worked a little different, where I knew how to navigate through. And the way I looked at it was that 17-year-old kid I was talking to, interacting with, that's an opportunity to work with these individuals because I'm a business major. So working with them on group projects and stuff like that, I can help them through it because I've done it, I lived it. So that's how I look at that opportunity. But everyone does not look at it in that way, because if I was an E4 or E3, whatever the case is, then I don't know how to do that because I was used to going to work and being told what to do and I got the job done. So their mind works a little different. One key thing from this slide is being separated from family or loved ones. And I can tell you, I've been on that side because I'm a military spouse. When I retired in 2013, my wife went to, she was actually the naval science instructor at NROTC Jacksonville University for 3 years. She left there in 2014, went to school for 9 months to learn to be a chief engineer as a department head, and was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia for 18 months. So she was going away from me and the kids for roughly 3 years. And I was left here with the kids and also going through school. So I had to ensure that I got my college education taken care of, and I made sure their homework was done. I had karate, I had to cook dinner, I had to do all the things that normally you would see or think of a woman being a military spouse would do. This guy did it. It's a challenge. So seeing your loved one leave, come and go is not very easy. And I know some of those we have at JU, maybe even in this class, has a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or mother or father who served, and you've been through it and you lived this life. It's not easy. And then you also have to train, you have to move every so many years. for some of us, we're used to being in one place forever. But then there's others who, I moved to Jacksonville, I'm only here for 18 months. So I'm a kid going to whatever high school or college or whatever. I met friends, but it's short term because after 18 months, I'm going somewhere else. So they have to readjust everywhere they go. So it's a tough life with them. Some of them act out along the way. It just depends. During Operation Iraqi and Enduring Freedom, there were definitely combat-related injuries, and post-traumatic stress is one. Traumatic brain injuries is definitely another one. That's a big thing that's out there. We have quite a few just in Jacksonville University alone. The majority of them were in the Army or Marine Corps who has post-traumatic stress. Now, I'm not going to say that any in the Air Force nor the Navy has it as well. There's less from those branches of service than they are in the Army Marine Corps, mainly because the mission. Like I said, the Army, they did things by way of ground. They've seen a lot of things, and they're reliving that moment, things they're seeing there or they may have encountered while they were over and during Iraqi freedom or enduring freedom. It's a lot of things. And for you guys being counselors, I've had quite a few students, who has PTSD go to the counseling center to get some type of assistance if ever needed. A lot of them will not let you know that they have it because they know you don't understand them. So they won't tell you. They'll tell me, and I can depict it anyway when I first meet them because I can see certain things about them just that quick. But if they can trust in you, they'll definitely talk to you and let you know the issues they're encountering. One of the biggest, one of the things is dealing with professors is a tough thing. They won't open up to them until they can trust them. So these are things that you will probably see somewhere, in your careers, those with PTSD or whatever. And to put that to rest, PTSD is not a military thing. It's just, it's just someone reliving a moment. So regardless, I could have been just a regular civilian that was in a bad car accident. And every time I ride past that spot that I was in that accident, I'm going to think about that. I may tense up or be afraid every time I go that direction. It's more on post-traumatic stress. And one takeaway is that not all veterans that have it. Some do, but not all. And years ago, they used to call it shell shock. During the Vietnam era, that's what they call it. But unfortunately, they didn't get the treatment that today's veterans are receiving. Like I said before, you're reliving a moment. PTS is not one injury that you can see. Traumatic brain injury, most times you can see it. And to go back to PTSD, if someone was in a classroom and popped a balloon or something like that, you'll know that person has it because that's going to be the person that's going to react very quickly. Normally, when we hear something like that, we all kind of like, "Oh my God, what is that?" It's a whole different dynamic when it comes to someone who has PTS from the military, and they'll never sit with their backs facing the door, windows, anything like that. It's a lot of things that's different that you can kind of depict from them to determine or even to know in your mind that there's something about that individual. Uh-oh. Military sexual trauma is a huge wound of war that a lot of people do not talk about. There's a lot going on, or what's going on when the soldiers, Marines, what have you, were over in Afghanistan, Iraq, that were raped. And I'm not just talking about male on females, male on male, which is definitely on the rise. It's a lot of that. So I know I'm speaking to a class of college students and not the professors, but normally what I would tell the professors is be careful what you may say around somebody, because they will eventually react, even though you don't know anything about them. Something you may say where it comes to some type of sexual situation, that they may react a certain way. They may not say anything to you. They may feel a certain way about something. I had a student last term who came to me and said, I don't understand why our professor had a guest speaker that was talking about LGBT. And I had to educate her on how they were making the awareness. They have to. Today's society is a whole different thing. She eventually understood after we had a conversation, but she felt some kind of way and felt like she wanted to tell somebody that was inappropriate. But it really wasn't. Once she was educated on what was going on. Any questions?
Mike, I would hope, and maybe you have this set up for later in your talk, but I just think it's a good place to put it out. Tell me what your thoughts are. Tell us what your thoughts are about building trust. You touched on that and the importance of that, and how, since that's one of the most important things, obviously, in the counseling relationship.
Right.
What we do. How do we do that with military members?
Well, I know there's a few things I'm going to talk about here in future slides, but building their trust. I mean, it's a good question. There's several different things. A lot of times they sit back and observe you, and just by observing you, they can say, you know what, I can trust dealing with this individual, or I don't trust this person at all, just based on your actions and who you are. And there's some that they'll start liking you based on conversations and stuff that you will have. I would tell you, if someone opens up to you and wants to tell you about their military career or whatever, the key thing is to listen to them, never shut them down, because if you do, you have lost all trust with that person, because they trusted in you to tell you anything about them that they wanted you to know, because they don't do that with everybody. I don't know if that answered your question, Will, but I know there's some things along the way that we'll get into it as well.
I had a question too.
Uh-huh.
On the topic of PTSD, my boyfriend lives with active PTSD, and I'm very empathetic and understanding, and allow him to, watch the door, always, carry with him, because that makes him more comfortable.
Right.
But especially as a counselor, setting personal stuff aside, where do you draw the line? Where do you intervene?
Trying to make sure I understand your question correctly. You said that he likes to do certain things and you allow him to do it.
As far as, whenever we're at a restaurant, him sitting in viewpoint of the door, feels more comfortable, can still carry all the time. But setting personal aside, as a counselor,
right,
I'm not too sure, where, if say we were working with a veteran with active PTSD, where do we intervene or draw the line?
That's a good question, because I'm actually not a counselor. I mean, I have experience with working with veterans, and that's just a natural thing.
Mhm.
But for you, you have different guidelines you have to follow. And yes, you have to, well, I mean, I don't put my personal feelings in there because you should never do that. But for you, where do you draw the line? I don't really have that experience to tell you that. I wish I did. Dr. Wagner may, I don't know.
We'll be debating about that all term.
There you go. All right.
Do you?
Huh?
Quick question. I'm not too familiar with like the military's recruitment process,
Okay.
but say you got a 17, 18-year-old kid,
Mhm.
you're trying to recruit, male or female.
Hmm.
Well, is it typical practice for maybe like a Navy recruiter to kind of mention, the experience, anything trauma related that could happen, or what that particular branch does to offer resources for that kind of thing?
So I was a recruiter from 1999 to 2003. I've never told anybody anything about any kind of crisis or nothing like that, because that was never a question that I ever had to face. Normally a person I would deal with wanted to join the Navy because their mother or father had no money to send them to college. So the conversation was normally about college, or to iron out an objection. Normally for the Navy, I don't want to join the Navy because I don't want to be out on the water all the time. That's one of the biggest things. And to iron that out, I would let them know that the way it works is, yes, you are stationed on board a ship if you are on a ship, but you're not always going away from your family in the water, that type deal, giving them some type of, explanation from my experience so they'll understand it better. But I've never, I mean, things are different today because when I was recruiting, 9/11 happened. So things changed then. So things may be different now. So I really don't know.
Do you know if for those active duty now, does the chain of command often mention like just different resources if anyone's struggling with any kind of trauma they're having difficulty processing and things like that?
Yes. So every, and actually there's one in your class. Every military installation has a chaplain who's in charge. And normally when they have situations like that, they will go see the chaplain to get some kind of guidance. And everything that they talk to the chaplain about is actually confidential. The chaplain does not have to tell anybody about that military member situation. That military member could have been raped, could have some things going on within the command. I say command, but like if I'm on the ship, and whatever that conversation is really confidential. And Will is who I'm talking about. He can tell you more because I never dealt with that. I was more in a supervisory role. And yes, I've had people who had issues where they were alcoholics and they needed some help, and I would refer them to the right place, because we do have people on the base to assist with that type of stuff too. Alcohol, drugs, maybe a situation where you may be abusive to your spouse. These are different things I can refer you to because I know is out there. But me personally, I can't really, I couldn't really sit there and counsel you about that because that's not my experience level. And also, if someone came to me with a major situation, I have to ensure that I send you to the right people to get the help. Because if I had a conversation with you and something happened further and the word got back that I knew about it, I was in trouble majorly. So there's proper protocols that we have to follow.
So would something have to travel up the chain of command then?
Yes. Well, it depends. If there was a situation where the person came to me and told me about a situation and didn't want anybody to know, and I think it right that they can go speak to the chaplain, I will ensure that they go speak to the chaplain. I don't have to tell anybody else nothing about the situation. That's where that trust factor comes in too. Because if you go out there and say, yeah, guess what? Such and such had a conversation with me today about this, and the word gets back, you would never get that opportunity to talk to that person again, because you've lost everything that person had in you. So you have to follow the proper protocols, just like you do in life. I used to be what we call it's no longer called SAVI, but Sexual Assault Victim Intervention Advocate. Now they call it SAPR, because they want it to be the same with all branches of service. If someone came to me and said that they were raped by someone on the ship, or maybe even by someone out in town, I don't have to tell anybody. I have to make sure that they go through the proper channels. You have two types of reporting, right? And those, I lost my train of thought. What it is? It's I forgot what it was. But anyway, one of them, depending on how they want this to be reported, everybody would know about it. The other way, only certain people would know about it. And that's how that works. Anything else? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. I was just wondering. I actually had a patient not too long ago, because I know the military culture is a bit different, and there's the chain of command to consider. Yeah. So I was just wondering if a sailor or a soldier decided they were going through something, they might have shared it with the chaplain, but they weren't comfortable showing back up to work for whatever reason. That's something I would think a superior officer would need to know about, right?
It depends. I'm pretty sure the chaplain had things that they could put the individual through. I got somebody who wants to be admitted. I know my screen's going to freeze up again. It just really depends, and I don't have that knowledge base. And to go back to the two types of reporting, it's restricted and unrestricted, is what that is. But because it came to my mind, obviously, when you get close to 50, you start losing it. But yeah, it depends on your level. So if I have the need to know, I have the need to know. But like Will being a chaplain, he knows what he needs to know, and he'll follow the protocols as such. And if someone asks, he can tell them what he wants them to know. You don't have to tell them everything or nothing at all, because that person's protected.
Yeah, and truly, and Rick, the only way a chaplain can release any information is given permission by the counselee in writing. So the privilege is not the chaplain's, the privilege is the member who comes to us. And they tell us, and we are bound by that privilege to maintain absolute confidentiality unless they give us permission to say otherwise. So even if we wanted to, we can't by law. And I mean, it's gone to the Supreme Court. It's gone that high. Chaplains cannot divulge or cannot reveal contents of the counseling setting unless the client or counselee has given permission to release it in writing, not just verbally, in writing. They take it that seriously.
And Rick, I appreciate your questions, because one thing I would tell you is if I don't know it, I'm not going to act like I know it. And the good thing is we have someone like Will in the class who actually answer those questions, because my answer at that point would be, I need to, reach out to somebody and get back to you. But we're able to have this conversation and get a lot of this information that you need to know to the forefront to kind of educate your mind on some of the things and how the military operates when it comes to these type of situations. But I hope we answered your questions to better your understanding.
You did. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. So we're going to move on to understanding students with a military affiliation. And the first thing is the military veteran. So everyone who is at Jacksonville University using benefits, they're not veterans. But I'm going to start with veterans and I'll keep moving on so you have an understanding of who they are. So military veteran is someone who served between 2 and 30 years. Mainly 4 years, but 2 years would then give you veteran status if something happened. As we know, students at a university is definitely going to be older than your typical college student. But most of these I'm not going to necessarily go over because it's mainly when I'm talking to a faculty or staff at the university. But I just want to give you an understanding of who a military veteran is and then so on and so forth on the next slides. And then you have an active duty member. Active duty member is the individual who is still serving in the United States military. So your veteran is no longer in. Now, a person can be a veteran who served under active duty and no longer on active duty, but they are now in the reserves. They're still considered a military veteran. Okay, so we have what's called the Medical Enlisted Commissioning Program at Jacksonville University, and those are for your Navy hospital corpsmen who are enlisted. Well, not even hospital corpsmen. Anyone who was enlisted that wants to be a naval nurse, they would have to go through a process. First thing is being accepted into Jacksonville University's nursing program, and then they have to apply through I call it MECEP, but it's Medical Enlisted Commissioning Program through the Navy. If the Navy selects them for the program, they will come to Jacksonville University for 3 years to be a college student, and the whole purpose is to finish up, get their degree, and be commissioned as a Navy nurse. So they'll be anywhere from E1 all the way up through E7 is what I've seen so far. And they'll get commissioned and they'll be an O1. And these students, they have orders to come to Jacksonville University, but they are supported under the Naval Air Station Jacksonville's hospital. Now, this is one MECEP and this is another MECEP, but these are two totally different programs. This MECEP is the Marine Enlisted Commissioning Education Program, and this is for those who are enlisted in the Marine Corps to come to Jacksonville University for 4 years to get their commission. So they will be a part of Jacksonville University's NROTC unit. And once they complete their 4 years and obtain their degree, they will be commissioned as an O1. And you have an officer candidate. Like I mentioned before, my wife was enlisted. She came to Jacksonville University through a Seaman to Admiral 21 program. And when she was at Jacksonville University in the program, she was known as an officer candidate because she was actually enlisted in the Navy. They were there on orders for 3 years and also a part of Jacksonville University's NROTC unit. So officer candidate, Marine Enlisted Commissioning Education Program, they were all under the NROTC program, but they are active duty service members. Now we have midshipmen. They are not known as an active duty member, nor are they a veteran. These are individuals who graduated from high school and received a NROTC scholarship to come to Jacksonville University to get their college degree and become a naval officer or Marine Corps officer. Notice I said Naval or Marine Corps because it falls under the Navy. Not all who's in the NROTC program is known as a midshipman actually have the scholarship. There are some who wants to join the Navy or Marine Corps as an officer to become an officer. And what they're doing is they're paying for their college on their own, but they're partaking in the program with hopes of receiving a scholarship. The commanding officer of the unit can actually give a scholarship to those around the end of their sophomore year into their junior year to pay for the rest of their schools. They cannot become a Naval or Marine Corps officer just by paying for Jacksonville University on their own and partaking in the unit. They have to have the scholarship that is issued by the Navy Marine Corps in order to be commissioned as an officer. They have to meet all requirements. One key thing, and I know Will dealt with these students a lot, and I'll tell you why. These students are required to deal with a lot, mainly the Navy students, not the Marine Corps. But while they are taking their classes, whatever program they are in, they will have to take, with the exception of the nursing, they will have to take Calculus 1 and 2 and Physics 1 and 2 with all their majors. That is very stressful. And not only that, they have things that they have to do with the NROTC unit. They still have to, every Thursday, they have the drill. You'll see, well, you guys won't probably see because you come to class in the evenings, but during the day, you'll see a student in uniform, and that's normally on a Thursday. But they also have things that they'll do in the mornings and even in the late evenings that they have to do for the unit. They may have to stand on watch or stand duty and also have to maintain a 2.5 GPA. So this is a very stressful program. I mean, not like the Naval Academy, but it's still stressful where they may need to seek counseling for whatever reason because they're not used to this type of environment. They're not used to this level of stress that's being placed on them. But it's getting them prepared for the type of stress that they're going to deal with when they get out into the officer world once they get commissioned, because it's stressful out there. All right, so starting with midshipmen, there is no active duty, military, or veteran connection whatsoever. Then you have your military dependent, and your military dependent is normally the children of a military member. This, I think that for this purpose of this presentation, spouse falls under this too, but they're different. You have the military dependent and you have the military spouse. So military dependent, there again, not military. Midshipman, not military. But your officer candidate, your Marine Enlisted Commissioning Education Program, and your Medical Enlisted Commissioning Program, they are all active duty military. Then you have your active duty member who may not have any ties to that. They're just going to school to get to their education. And you have your military veteran who either retired or separated from the military honorably, and they're no longer in. Okay, this military service poll is not a JU thing, it's actually a national poll. And one of the biggest takeaways from this is that 96% feel proud of their service. And I will definitely tell you, a Marine Corps, someone who served in the Marine Corps, I don't care if they did 2 years. Anyone who served in the Marine, you will see a Marine Corps sticker on their vehicle. And they love it. That's the only branch that I can guarantee you will see that. There's a lot of people who serve, in the Navy and other branches that they love what they did, but they don't want to be known for that anymore, and they let it go. But I've met some Marine folks where they have their Marine Corps balls, and they could have been out for years, but they still put that uniform on, and they go to the ball and have a great time. They are serious about that. And I believe that began with their training that they received. Because as a Marine Corps, you are Marine first, and whatever you do as a specialty is secondary. And that's how they train their people. So that's the big thing to take away from the rewards. And then the skills learned is the work ethics. It's one of the highest. And you guys see the rest on there. You said something, Will?
I just mentioned Semper Fi. That's their.
Yeah,
Oh,
Semper
yeah.
Fidelis. Okay, education benefits. Originally known as the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, came out in 1944. The GI Bill of Rights. Now, the GI Bill is not just for education. There is a lot of different things that falls under that. As you can see, where it says includes, you have your medical, you can get a small business loan, home loans, a lot of things that falls into that. And you know, from the issues and mistakes that happened from the First World War, they didn't want that to happen again because a lot of people came back and was unemployed. And just think what goes along with unemployment. And we talked about PTSD, which back then was known as shell shock. You had a lot of issues, people taking their lives or taking their spouses or kids' lives because of the stress that they dealt with. And they didn't want that to happen anymore. So we wanted those to come back from the military, from the wars, and get some type of education. The current GI Bill program we use today that is mostly used is the post 9/11 GI Bill. This is for those who served after September 11, 2001. There's different levels depending on how long you served after that time frame. If you served at least 36 months after that time, you qualify for 100% of the benefit. What does that mean? I am now a veteran. I qualify for 100%, which next academic year is $25,164.44. That's 100%. But because I'm a veteran or a spouse of a veteran or a dependent of a veteran, Jacksonville University is a yellow ribbon school that will allow that individual to come to JU and don't have to worry about paying their tuition at all. And then they get a housing allowance on top of that. Now, those that are less than 100% will not qualify for yellow ribbon. And what does that mean? So I served 90 days, at least 90 days of active duty time. I would be at least 40% eligible, which will change this August. They'll be 50% eligible to use the post 9/11 GI Bill, which they will still receive housing allowance and they will still receive some money towards their tuition, but they're only going to receive that percentage of the $25,164.44, and that's it. No yellow ribbon at all goes along with that. Of course, the active duty service member can transfer this benefit to his or her spouse or children. You have to be on active duty. This is used as a retention tool. So if you decide to transfer, you have to give the military 4 more years in order to qualify to transfer the benefit. You have to serve at least a minimum of 10 years of service, which means once you hit your 6-year mark, you can transfer the benefit because you're going to give them 4 more years. But when you hit 16 years, you can no longer transfer the benefit because, well, after 16 years, because anything after 16, most service members who retire will do 20. So if I'm at 17 years, I'm only going to give 3 years, right? That can't happen. So they stop it at 16. Anything after that, you can't do anymore. Talked about yellow ribbon, but the one thing on the bottom is known as the Marine Gunnery Sergeant Fry Scholarship. That is for those who lost their mother, father, husband, or wife on active duty. So they get 100% of the benefit to go to school, and that's all their kids. Now the post 9/11 GI Bill, if I have 3 kids and I only get 36 months, I need to figure out how I want to spread that out. Either I'm going to give each one 12 months apiece, or I know Johnny's not going to go to college, so I'll give the other 2 18 months apiece, or whatever it may be. That's up to me to decide. Okay, comfortable sharing service experience at school. Proud of service was number 1, which is 83%. Most who served are proud of what they've done. And when we do leave it, I mean, even when I retired, best believe I cried like a baby. But that's because I knew I was leaving something that I've known for a long time, and I loved it, and I was proud of it. but I knew that I had to go and move on to other things. There are very few, as you can tell, there's about 12, I mean, not 12, but 17% out there that's not proud of it for whatever reason. They may have had a bad experience and probably didn't separate on an honorable basis. There's so many different things that could have happened there. The no portion of it is the lack of familiarity with military service. And that's why I do this green zone training, because I want you to be familiar with who you're dealing with. Some of you I know want to be a counselor for military. And I know some of you don't have a military background, but something like this would give you a basic synopsis of knowing who they are. And now you know from the beginning of it, you know, the Department of Defense, what do you call a sailor, or what's an enlisted rank, what's an officer rank. So these things you kind of know a little bit about now. As a veteran, have you encountered any problems at school? A lot will say the age differences, even though most of who I deal with today have only served 4 years because they only joined to get the money through the GI Bill. They'll come to me at 22 years old and they will say, "Oh, I can't believe I'm here with these kids." I'm like, "Really? You're only 22?" But that's how they think, because even though they're only a few years apart from the 18 to 21-year-olds currently in college, they've done more. And that 22-year-old may already have his or her own apartment and doing things that a normal 22-year-old would not be doing at this point. And they may have a car, paying their own bills. Some are still living with mom and dad who's still taking care of their responsibilities. Transition challenges. Things to keep in mind about student veterans in the class. Well, we're talking in the classroom, but veterans as a whole. I mean, some will have difficulties relating. Like I mentioned before, that group cohesion, when they get out the military, is going to be a culture shock for a lot, because even I come to work now, I mean, people walk past you, don't say anything to you. But when you were in the military, you were used to people walking by, "Hey, Mike, how you doing?" or whatever. You know, "How you doing, Chief? Good morning." Now people walk past you because they had a bad morning or just don't want to speak at that point in time, and they go to their office and that's it. So that camaraderie that I was used to, I don't get that anymore. You know, the times of going into the chief mess and having a little laughing session for about 30 minutes to an hour before going, you know, starting your day. That's not what it is anymore. So you're going to work, going straight to work, and you're going to do what you got to do, and that's just it. So it's a whole different world. Hey, this is our JU military program, starting with the university president all the way down to even you guys. You know, I know you're students, but being a student at JU, especially students on the grad level, if you ever see anything with our veterans on campus, there's nothing saying you can't bring them to me or pull them aside and say, "Hey, something doesn't look right about you. Is everything okay?" Have that conversation with that person and say, "Hey, do you know Mike Mitchell?" or whatever. You can even reach out to me. "Hey, Mike, I ran into someone today and something wasn't right about him or her. You know, I need you to reach out to him." Believe it or not, I know a lot of times when you tell me a situation, even though I have over about 450 students that I deal with, I know a lot of them just by the characteristics of who they are. You know, you can just bring a situation to me. I've had professors do it a lot. Like, "How do you know?" "Oh, trust me, I know how he or she carries him or herself." It's crazy. It's just something that I have. One of the big things that we have at JU that we didn't have as a student when I came as a student is a Defender's Den. I don't know how many of you know where the Defender's Den is located, but if you know where Chick-fil-A is, you would normally pass by the Founders Building, and you'll see that green awning that says Defenders Den. That's where the active duty service members and the veterans, that's where they can go and just hang out with other like-minded veterans and just be themselves, or also at the same time go and do some classwork and get some things done between classes. But that's the great thing about having that other veterans can get together with others and help each other out, you know, especially in classes where I may have had before, and I know you're either taking it now or you're going to be taking it. They talk all the time. Oh, you don't want this professor, you want that person, so on and so forth. They're helping each other out to get through the process, and that's that camaraderie again. And all don't go there, but there are some who go there all the time because they rely and depend on the Defenders Den to get them through the day. And then I do military orientations at the beginning of each term with the exception of summer. But because I don't do military orientations over the summer, I make sure I bring those summer students into the fall orientation to ensure they know what we offer at JU to make their college tenure very successful. Knowing about the tutoring center, knowing about the counseling center, things like that. Because I want them to know what's out there, because when I first took over this role, I think after the first 2 terms, I've had students come in my office mad because they didn't know that we offered this or that, and it would have helped them get through that semester. So I then said, okay, I got to change something, do something differently. So doing these military orientations definitely help out a lot because I'm able to bring more people into it. So I got 100 people coming in the fall. I would at least get about 60 students, because some of those in that 100 will be freshman start that would go to the actual freshman orientations. We have a Student Veterans of America chapter on campus, and that's where you don't have to be a veteran. You can just have a passion for working with military or whatever. They have, well, when we get back to some type of normalcy, we meet twice per month during the day, during the lunch hour, where there's lunch and different speakers. I normally bring in someone to talk about jobs or whatever, because the whole point is to enhance their lives after Jacksonville University. I want to make sure that they become employed before they graduate. So I bring different people on campus for different things, where it could be the VA or some type of employer or whatever, to speak to them. We had for the third year, a Student Veteran of the Year. I named the Student Veteran of the Year the last week of classes for the spring, and her name is Giselle Anderson. She is a Navy veteran who was in the psychology. She got a bachelor's in psychology. Now she's going to go to another school for not mental health, but something in that arena. The husband got commissioned to warrant officer, and they moved to Virginia. And then discounts offered at Jacksonville University. All veterans, active duty military and veterans, get what's called, I don't know if you can see this, but you see that V? That V on the ID card stands for veteran. That's the student ID. And they get a discount at the cafeteria, and also a discount on all logo JU items, not books, but just any logo JU items. So I want to buy a JU t-shirt or what have you, I get a discount. I think it's a 10% discount. All right, easing the transition. I'm going to go through a few of these. What student veterans want you to know? Well, one of the things that I will point out to you is no 2 veterans are alike. So just because I'm a veteran, Will's a veteran, we have two different experience, and we came from from two different backgrounds. So we're not the same individuals, but we had successful military tours or careers. But don't ever think that because I carry myself a certain way that, well, why doesn't Will carry himself that way? Because Will is Will and Mike is Mike. That's just how that is. They don't want you to be afraid of them. They want you to be able to talk to them if you like to. And the bottom one is the big one. They are definitely too proud to ask for help. That's one thing. They try because we were used to getting things done. And out here, what we still want to do is get things done, but the reality of it is we can't because we're facing a different situation. It's not what we're used to dealing with when we were active duty in the military. So you may see something, don't be afraid to help them out because they're not going to say it, but you can kind of see that they're having a tough time with something. Okay, getting near the end. And this is mainly having conversations with the veteran. These are suggested questions. The two at the bottom in bold, definitely do not ask. I mean, there are people who, because they don't know any better, they will ask these questions, and that's not something you want to talk to that person about. Key thing, I'll let you read this yourself. But the main takeaway is just listen. And of course, as a counselor, that's what you're going to do. You're going to do a lot of listening. And don't put your personal whatever in there. Okay, academic struggles. A student veteran approaches you because she is struggling in her classes. She goes to class every day, take notes, and allot time each day to study. She feels frustrated no matter how much time she puts into it. She is not getting the grades she wants. As a counselor, that student came to you. How would you address that situation? Somebody. Or I will start calling on some people. Let's see. Alejandro, what would you do? You're a counselor now. And you're a counselor at Jacksonville University. What you gonna do?
Yeah, I would. I'd listen to see kind of what their experience is, how they're managing the transition.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also like to get them to some of the resources on campus with like academic struggles.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good answer. You're in the right area. How about you, Allison? What you got?
So the question was if someone came to me who is, okay, at JU.
So
I actually did have that experience since I worked at the JU Counseling Center. I interned there.
Good.
And one of my clients is in the ROTC program.
Okay.
Listening was the main thing. So I'm glad that was highlighted on your slides.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But what would you do in this situation? So a student veteran approaches you because she is struggling in her classes. She goes to class every day, take notes, lots time each day to study. She's frustrated because no matter how much time she puts into it, she's not getting the grades she wants. So as a counselor, how would you address that situation? I'm still on you, Allison. Oh, you still?
Yeah, no, I was reading it. Sorry.
You were looking like, oh.
Yeah, well, I would address the frustration. I would address her feelings about that and explore that further.
So you would explore it further. What would you suggest?
Well, I try not to suggest. I usually want to hear where they want to go with things.
Right.
And then I would take it from there. But resources on campus, just like Alex was mentioning.
Yeah.
Academic support.
You got it.
It's something I referred to before.
You got it. Yep. I mean, you guys are all right. And I have no doubts that you would do well. So yeah, so let's go to the answer. And like you said, Allison, you know, you want to kind of hear them, so on and so forth, and you want to, you know, if they're always having difficulties with their schoolwork, trying to learn that student and seeing how you can help them better, and you know, assisting them with the academic help, like you both mentioned. And the other piece would be always, you know, if there's any issues that you think I can definitely help out with as well, feel free to direct them my way or reach out to me, and I'll reach out to them and give them the assistance they need, because one of the key things is they might be having difficulties, but there's somebody in the defender's den who may have already taken that class or whatever that can give them some kind of guidance of their struggles. Because I know when I first came to JU, my first semester and a half, I just knew I wasn't going to finish. But eventually I did, but I had to work my way through it. And after that, I was on the dean's list from that point forward, but I just had to get things in perspective to ensure I'd gotten better. All right, so be prepared. I don't know, what's Mahati? Did I say that right? Oh man, I'm doing good. All right, be prepared. A student veteran comes to you because he is frustrated about his classes. The material he is learning is exactly what he learned when he was in the while he was in the military. He does not understand why he has to repeat the course.
So first thing, listening, and I would probably explore his frustrations and also see how it is different, the coursework, that like what the differences are, or based on the contextual settings, and basically explore his frustrations and why he's feeling frustrated. Yes.
And I said Mahati, right?
Mahati.
Oh, yeah, Mahati. Got it.
Mahati.
All right, let me see who else I can find in this scroll. Yeah, you're smiling. But I'm gonna pass you and come back. Actually, it ain't not too many in here. There we go. Elizabeth.
Hello.
How we doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. You're the one I let in and you froze my screen.
Oh, I did? Sorry. I'm having
right.
internet connection problems all the time.
But how would you tackle this situation as being a JU counselor?
I would probably, personally, I would highlight the benefits of how great it is that you've already learned all this and you can come in and apply it to the course. But I think also, just walking through the process of school and, how it's different and how it's the same, but, it's a process. Similar to the military, you have to follow this particular process. You have to engage in these classes if you want to continue with the work. Correct. So just, I think, laying it out in a very practical sense might be helpful. And then also just kind of getting to the root of what's the struggle, where's the frustration, and having to, work on material that you feel like you already know, I think might be helpful.
That's good, because an individual like me who had 21 years in the military, and out of those 21 years, I had about at least 15 years of managerial experience, came to JU for business management. And I would ask myself a lot of times, why am I in this class? I'm coming to class getting hundreds. I'm wasting my time, with the exception of accounting and finance, but management, seemed like I was wasting my time. But then, like I said, I took it from the way I think and took it as an opportunity to teach the younger students in the class when we were doing group projects to help them out. So I figured it out. There was no way around it. I had to take it. So suck it up and keep moving. Mm-hmm. Yes, but like you guys said, empathize with the frustration and explain the advantage of already having the experience. Just like you said, Elizabeth, that's good. You guys, hey, I'm going to need counseling one day, so I want to make sure I see one of y'all. All right. Big one. Be prepared. Let's see. Alexandra. I'm going to read it first, and then I want you to answer this. A student veteran comes to you because he feels very alone on campus. He was used to being constantly surrounded by individuals who share his goals and values. Since he has come to campus, he has not met anyone like that. He feels isolated and alone. How do you help this student?
I think first and foremost, I would explore with him resources that we can offer to hook him up with other veterans who may be having similar experiences. And then additionally, explore his symptoms with depression and feeling isolated. Right. Yeah, I mean, resources would be my number one go-to there.
Good. Ren.
Hey, I'm gonna introduce them to you, Mike, because you're a person of energy, affirmation, and enthusiasm. And you're gonna give him some positivity and some mentoring. You're gonna connect him to some other individuals. He might wanna visit the den.
Right.
Get him in touch with those folks on campus who are in similar situation. Yeah.
Good. You guys are doing great. And I tell you, I dealt with a situation like this my first year as being a student veteran coordinator. And this particular student was an Army veteran who had PTSD and TBI. He actually lost a limb. Did not know about Defenders Den. Didn't really know anything. He was a kinesiology student. He was going to class and did not know any like-minded individuals. He had 2 of his buddies within a few days apart kill themselves, and he felt like he had no self-worth. He stopped coming to class a few days, and the professor, because that professor actually took the Green Zone training I gave, I want to say a month or so prior, and something wasn't right about that student. So that professor reached out to me, said, hey, I got a student I'm a little concerned about. And that professor called me, actually, yeah, because I give my cell phone numbers to all veteran students. I don't hide, well, all students who I work with. I don't hide that. And I answered the phone maybe 8 or 9 o'clock that night, and we talked. And the next morning, I sent an email already to the counseling center, and I asked the student, would he be available to meet me first thing in the morning? He sure did. And we he came, we spoke a little bit, and he explained the issues he was dealing with and what was happening. And like you guys, I listened to him. And I said, oh man, sorry to hear that, da, da, da. I took him personally over to the counseling center in one of the golf carts. My first time actually doing that. I've never taken a student to the counseling center before because this was all new to me at JU. And I met him when he was done. I wanted to find out, how the counseling center worked for him, and he loved it. It was great. I took him for a tour around campus because he didn't get that before. He started JU prior to me starting a job. I'm not taking any credit from anybody or saying that I'm like the greatest guy, but I was able to show him around and show him the Defenders Den. He connected with our other veterans and started hanging out with a few of them that were married like he was, had kids. Uh-oh. Haley, am I boring you? I'm just messing with you. So with him, he finally got himself where he needs to be. He graduated from JU, and now he's the strength and conditioning coach with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he was doing an internship with them the last year. That was the year the Jaguars was very close to going to the Super Bowl, and we lost to the New England Patriots. I remember his Facebook post right after that. He thought it was all the end for him because that was the end of his internship. He didn't know what he was going to do. And the next day, Coach Tom Coughlin called him in the well, he wasn't a coach. He was somewhere in a leadership role around there. But he called him in his office and hired him. So he's doing great to this day. So those are the things that we all can do at JU to help these students out, or even somewhere in your future lives as a counselor. connecting them with the right people to get them on the right path. Yep, like I said, inform them of the resources available. I need to change that. Student veteran coordinator, I'm not that anymore, but yeah. And ask the type of interest. And I definitely followed up with him a lot. I followed up with him throughout the course of his time at JU to ensure all was well. We would go out to lunch together and stuff like that. All right, so Haley, this is for you. A student veteran comes to you for his scheduled academic advising appointment. During the session, no, I'm going to change this for the purpose of you guys. A student veteran comes to you for his counseling appointment. During a session, he mentions that he did 2 tours in Iraq. How do you respond? Can I hear? Haley, leave me? Like she's trying to connect her audio. Uh-oh.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I had to go to my phone. My laptop wasn't working. Can you reread me the scenario?
Well, let me go back because I had to let you back in and my screen locked this for some reason. All right. A student veteran comes to you for his scheduled counseling appointment. During this session, he mentions that he did 2 tours in Iraq. How do you respond?
Well, I guess I would first try to get some information of how that was for him, validate, like, wow, that must have been quite the experience. Like, what was that like for you? And just validate, you know, how difficult of an experience that probably was for him. So I guess a lot of validating and empathy. And just ask him, you know, what are his current feelings towards that time that he had there? Gauge, you know, what his support system is like, if there's other people, you know, in his life that he feels like he can talk about those tours in Iraq with. So I guess I'd get some information about his current feelings towards that time in his life, if he sees them as a really traumatic, negative experience, or if he's very proud about that. So I guess first gather some information and really just try to empathize and meet him where he's at.
Okay, sound good. How about you, Kelly? You're muted.
Hello. Hi. I would probably start by thanking him for his service, for his duty, serving our country. And then, you know, similar to what Haley said, I would just want to ask him, like, is it something that you want to continue to talk about? Are you comfortable talking about it? Is it something that you're interested in sharing with me more about? And just kind of giving him the option to continue to explore it and talk about it if he's comfortable with it.
Asking for permission to talk. Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
Good, good. See, I may have 1 or 2 more. Let's see here. Well, this is definitely the answer to it, is showing interest and just listening to the veteran. Okay, yeah, that's it. So these are the resources. This training is actually on your, when you log into ju.edu. It's on the intranet on the bottom right-hand side of the screen under available training. And it's green zone training. Of course, like I said, I'm the director of the Military and Veterans Resource Center. We have faculty that are military veterans. We have a student veterans chapter on campus, so on and so forth. But all of the main thing is everyone at JU as a whole, we are resources. And especially if you attend this training, you have a little bit of knowledge to make you even better when it comes to working with military students. other resources, things that you could look at, in your personal time. And that is it for me.